Universal Terror Commissions study how humans transformed fear into entertainment media. Part 1. Senior investigator had never felt anything like it. His sensory tendrils, evolved over millions of years to detect distress across star systems, trembled with the overwhelming data flooding through them. The readings from the newly contacted human made no sense whatsoever. The stood before the Universal Terror Commission, his three eyes blinking in different rhythms as he tried to organize his thoughts. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species waited in concerned silence. The commission existed for one purpose: to identify and respond to large-scale suffering anywhere in the galaxy. In its 3,000-year history, it had helped end wars, stopped plagues, and evacuated populations from dying worlds. But this was different. "The fear signatures are constant," said his translator, rendering his chemical speech into standard galactic. "Every rotation of their planet, massive spikes of terror, coordinated, simultaneous, happening in their population centers." He paused, his tendrils curling inward with distress. "I detected terror from what the humans call New York, affecting approximately 2,000 individuals, then Los Angeles, another 3,000, then London, Tokyo, Mumbai. It never stops." Council speaker, a being of pure crystallized thought, pulsed with orange concern. "Warfare. No combat signatures, no weapons discharge, no casualty indicators. Disease outbreak." This from the medical observer, her gills fluttering with worry. "Negative. The same individuals register fear signatures repeatedly, some daily. They remain alive and physically healthy according to our bioscans." "Torture," growled Ambassador of the Dominion. "The reptilian predator species understood cruelty, even if they found systematic torture distasteful. Some form of psychological warfare. Perhaps their governments are testing compliance methods on their own populations." The commission chamber filled with alarmed chatter. This made sense to them. They had seen many species go through dark periods before achieving true civilization. If humanity was still in such a phase, perhaps they weren't ready for galactic contact after all. "We must investigate immediately," Council Speaker announced. "Dr. Ara, you will lead the anthropological team. Ambassador, provide security personnel. Determine what is happening to the humans and whether intervention is required." Dr. Ara accepted the assignment with quiet determination. The scientist had studied 17 different species during first contact scenarios. She had seen civilizations struggling with famine, with pollution, with the growing pains of planetary unity. But she had never encountered anything like the readings described. 3 days later, her ship achieved orbit around Earth. The planet was beautiful, she had to admit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns. But readings were confirmed. Even from orbit, the ship's sensors detected coordinated fear events happening across the surface. "There," said her tactical officer, highlighting a location. "Concentrated fear signature, 217 humans. Elevated heart rates, stress hormones flooding their systems, brain patterns indicating extreme distress." "Take us down," Ara ordered. "Full stealth approach. I want to see what's happening before they know we're observing." The ship descended over what human mapping designated as Portland, Oregon. The fear signature originated from a large structure in the urban center. Ara activated the external cameras and the view. Humans were lined up outside the building, hundreds of them waiting in an orderly queue. They were talking, laughing, eating something from small containers. Children ran around their parents' legs. Couples held hands. No one appeared distressed. "This makes no sense," her tactical officer said. "The fear readings are definitely coming from inside that structure, but these humans are voluntarily entering it." Ara watched as the line moved forward. A human in formal attire stood at the entrance, accepting small rectangular items from each person before allowing them inside. The humans entered willingly, some eagerly. A young female was practically bouncing with excitement as she approached the door. "Follow them," Ara ordered. "Route camera drones through the ventilation system." The drones slipped inside, their microscopic forms invisible to human detection. What they revealed left Ara's mandibles clicking in confusion. The humans sat in rows inside a darkened chamber, all facing a large illuminated wall. Images moved across the wall, accompanied by sounds, and the images were horrifying. A human female, alone in a dark structure, walking slowly down a corridor, ominous music playing. Then something lunged from the shadows, something twisted and wrong, and the female screamed. In the chamber, the watching humans also screamed. Their fear signatures spiked to levels that would indicate mortal terror in any other species. But no one ran. No one tried to escape. They remained in their seats, eyes fixed on the horror unfolding before them. The scene continued. More terrible images, more screaming both from the wall and from the audience. Ara watched as a young human male gripped his companion's arm, his knuckles pale from pressure. The companion didn't pull away. She leaned closer to him. For 2 hours, Ara observed. The humans subjected themselves to scenario after scenario of terror. When the images finally stopped and illumination returned to the chamber, the humans stood and filed out. They were smiling, laughing, discussing what they had just witnessed with evident enthusiasm. "This is insane," her tactical officer whispered. "They paid to experience that. I saw them exchange currency at the entrance. They voluntarily paid to be terrified." Ara's scientific mind raced through possibilities. Mass hypnosis, parasitic mind control, some form of religious ceremony. Nothing fit. She needed more data. Over the next week, her team observed similar events across the planet. They found structures humans called movie theaters showing horror films. They found larger installations called haunted houses, where humans walked through dark mazes while actors dressed as monsters jumped out to scare them. They found humans gathering around fires at night, telling each other stories specifically designed to frighten. They even found humans sitting alone in their dwellings, reading books or watching screens, deliberately consuming fear-inducing content. The data overwhelmed every model Ara had for understanding sentient behavior. No other species did this. They had entire medical institutes dedicated to eliminating fear responses through therapy and medication. They considered any fear beyond immediate survival response to be psychological damage requiring treatment. Even despite their predatory nature, only experienced fear in genuine danger situations. Once a made a kill, the hunt fear ended. They didn't preserve it, didn't replay it, didn't seek it out again for entertainment. But humans were different. Humans had built entire industries around fear. They created it artificially, packaged it, sold it, consumed it voluntarily, and then did it again. Ara decided direct contact was necessary. She couldn't understand this phenomenon through observation alone. She needed to speak with humans, to ask them why they did this bizarre thing. She chose her subject carefully. A human named who taught something called film studies at a learning institution. His records indicated he specialized in horror cinema. If anyone could explain this madness, perhaps he could. The meeting took place in his office, a small room filled with books and strange decorative items. Ara had revealed herself and her mission through official channels, and to her surprise, the human government had been cooperative, amused even. Didn't seem afraid of her, despite her appearance that many species found unsettling. He offered her a beverage called tea and gestured to a chair that had clearly been modified for non-human physiology. "So," said, leaning back in his own chair with a relaxed posture, "you want to know why we love horror?" Love, Ara's translator struggled with the emotional context. "You love fear." "We love horror entertainment," clarified. "There's a difference. Horror is controlled fear, safe fear. It's like—" He paused, searching for an analogy. "You know how physical exercise stresses the body to make it stronger. Horror is exercise for our fear response. Ara's antennae twitched. Other species eliminate their fear response through evolution and technology. You preserve yours deliberately. Eliminate it? Looked genuinely surprised. Why would we do that? Fear kept our ancestors alive. It's a survival tool. Just because we're not running from predators anymore doesn't mean we should throw it away. But you cause yourselves distress for recreation. Smiled. It's not distress, not really. It's stimulation. When I watch a horror movie, part of my brain knows I'm safe. I'm sitting in a theater, eating popcorn, surrounded by other people. But another part of my brain is experiencing the thrill of danger without any actual risk. It's exhilarating. Exhilarating, Ara tested the word. You find fear pleasurable. In the right context, absolutely. The spike of adrenaline, the tension, the release when the scary part is over. It's cathartic. It helps us process anxiety. It lets us face our mortality in a controlled way. And honestly, it's just fun. Ara struggled to comprehend. Fun. They did this for fun. She looked at his relaxed posture and easy smile, and realized she was encountering something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity had taken one of the most primal, most universal responses in biological life, the response that made creatures flee from danger, and they had transformed it into entertainment. I need to experience this myself, she said. I need to understand what you feel when you engage with this horror. Smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. I know just the movie to start with. As Ara left his office to prepare her report for the commission, she felt something she rarely experienced in her scientific career. She felt uncertain, and perhaps, though she would never have admitted it, she felt the tiniest tremor of fear at what she might discover about humanity and about fear itself. Part 2. The theater was nearly empty when Ara arrived. Had arranged a private screening, explaining that her first horror experience should be intimate and controlled. He had chosen something he called a classic, nothing too extreme. The film was titled Alien. Ara found the title somewhat ironic. She settled into a modified seat while took the one beside her. The lights dimmed. The screen illuminated. She activated her personal recording devices, determined to capture not just the visual and audio input, but her own biological responses for later analysis. The film began quietly. A spaceship, humans in cryogenic sleep, the slow awakening of the crew. Normal calm, almost boring. Then the distress signal. The decision to investigate. Had been right to call this a classic. Even Ara, with no context for human cinematic language, could feel the mounting tension in the way scenes were composed, the way music swelled and faded, the way shadows filled the frame. When the creature first appeared, violently erupting from the crew member's chest, Ara's entire carapace stiffened. Her biological fear response triggered despite her intellectual knowledge that this was fiction, that she was safe in a theater on Earth watching projected images. The creature was nightmare made flesh, all teeth and sharp angles and hostile intent. She glanced at. He was leaning forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the screen. His heart rate had elevated. She could smell the slight chemical change in his perspiration that indicated stress, but his expression wasn't one of genuine distress. It was engagement, focus. He was absorbed in the story. The film continued. The creature grew. It hunted the humans through their own ship using shadows and ventilation ducts, appearing and disappearing like a phantom. The crew died one by one. The music, the lighting, the packing, everything was calibrated to maximize dread. And it worked. Ara found herself anticipating each appearance of the creature, her muscles tensing, her breathing quickening. But something else was happening too. Between the scary moments there were beats of relief, characters bonding, small victories, moments of hope. The film wasn't just fear. It was a story with characters she was beginning to care about, with stakes that mattered. When the final human, a female named, prepared for her confrontation with the creature, Ara realized she was invested in the outcome. The climax arrived, the airlock sequence. the creature blown into space, gasping relief, and then the final scare, the creature hidden in the escape shuttle's desperate final gambit to survive. When it was over, when floated safe in once more, Aura felt something unexpected. She felt satisfied, exhausted but satisfied. The lights came up, turned to her with an expectant expression. That was, Aura searched for words. Terrifying, stressful. I experienced genuine fear responses throughout. But, prompted, clearly hearing the unspoken addition. But I also experienced engagement, investment. I wanted to survive. When she did, I felt. She paused, analyzing her own emotional state. I felt good. Despite the fear, or perhaps because of it, I felt good. Nodded. That's the paradox of horror. We seek out negative emotions in safe contexts and come out feeling positive. It's weird, I know, but it works. Over the following weeks, Aura immersed herself in human horror culture. She watched films ranging from classic Gothic stories to modern psychological thrillers. She read books by authors called Masters of Horror. She visited a Halloween attraction called A Haunted House, where actors in makeup chased her through dark corridors while she screamed along with delighted human children. She interviewed horror creators. A director named Lisa explained how she used camera angles and lighting to create dread. A special effects artist named Raj showed her the mechanical creatures and prosthetics used to create monsters. A makeup artist demonstrated how she transformed ordinary actors into zombies and ghosts. An author named Sarah described her process for crafting scary stories, how she found what frightened her personally and amplified it onto the page. Aura discovered that human horror came in countless varieties. There were monsters from folklore, vampires, werewolves, ghosts. There were science fiction horrors, alien invaders, artificial intelligences gone wrong, reality-warping entities. There were psychological horrors that didn't rely on monsters at all, just the darkness humans found within themselves. There were even comedic horrors, films and stories that blended fear with humor in ways that shouldn't work but somehow did. Each had passionate fans who debated its merits. Aura attended a convention dedicated to horror and found thousands of humans celebrating their favorite fears. They wore costumes of famous monsters. They attended panels where creators discussed their craft. They bought books and films and merchandise. The entire event pulsed with enthusiasm and joy. It's about community too, explained a young human named Alex, dressed as a character from something called Friday the 13th. Horror fans are some of the friendliest people you'll meet. We bond over shared fears. There's something special about sitting in a theater with strangers and all screaming at the same moment. It connects us. Aura interviewed mental health professionals who studied horror's psychological effects. Dr. Rachel Park, a therapist specializing in anxiety disorders, explained that controlled fear exposure could actually build emotional resilience. Horror allows people to practice fear responses in safe environments. It's exposure therapy in entertainment form. Studies show that people who regularly consume horror often cope better with real-world stress. A neurologist named Dr. James Wu showed her brain scans of humans watching horror films. See these areas lighting up. The amygdala processes the fear response. But notice the prefrontal cortex stays active too. That's the rational part saying this isn't real. The brain maintains both responses simultaneously. It's quite remarkable. The fear is real enough to generate physiological responses, but not real enough to trigger actual flight or fight behaviors. Aura attended a university seminar where students analyzed horror films as cultural artifacts. The professor, an elderly human named Doctor, no relation to, argued that horror reflected societal anxieties. Vampire stories proliferated during concerns about aristocracy and disease. Zombie films exploded during fears of conformity and consumerism. Alien invasion stories mirror immigration anxieties. We externalize our fears as monsters, then confront them symbolically. The more Aura learned, the more complex the picture became. Horror wasn't just entertainment. It was art, therapy, social commentary, community building, economic engine, and cultural touchstone all at once. Humans used horror to explore taboo subjects, to confront mortality, to process trauma, to challenge themselves, to bond with others, and yes, to have fun. She visited a small independent bookstore where a group met monthly to discuss horror literature. They were reading something called The Haunting of Hill House. The discussion ranged from architecture to psychology to feminism to the nature of reality itself. One participant, an older woman named, said something that stuck with Ara. Horror is the most honest genre. It acknowledges that the world is scary, that bad things happen, that we die. But it also shows us confronting those fears. Even when the characters don't survive, we survive. We close the book or leave the theater and we're still here. It's empowering in a strange way. Ara conducted surveys. She found that approximately 85% of humans engaged with horror content at some level, from casual viewers to devoted fans. She found that many humans traced their love of horror to childhood, to ghost stories around campfires or scary movies watched with friends. She found that horror transcended cultural boundaries. Every human culture had its own horror traditions, its own monsters, its own ways of confronting fear through story. The data overwhelmed her. She spent long nights in her temporary residence on Earth, compiling reports and analyzing findings. The Universal Terror Commission was waiting for her assessment. They wanted to know if humanity was suffering, if intervention was needed, if this species was healthy or damaged. Ara thought about the humans she'd met, passionate about his field of study. Lisa the director, proud of her craft. Alex at the convention, dressed as a fictional killer and radiating friendliness. Dr. Park, using horror therapeutically with her patients. At the book club, finding meaning and empowerment in scary stories. None of them were damaged. None of them were suffering. They were thriving in ways that most galactic species couldn't understand. She began composing her report. The preliminary findings would shock the commission, she knew, but the truth was undeniable. Humanity hadn't just survived their fear responses. They had mastered them, transformed them, turned them into tools for growth and connection and even joy. As she wrote, Ara realized she had changed. She had arrived on Earth expecting to find victims. Instead, she had found a species that faced their fears so completely that they invited fear in, stared at it directly, and came out stronger. It was the most human thing she had encountered, this refusal to run from darkness, this insistence on finding light even in terror. Her report would change how the galaxy understood humanity. She was certain of that. What she couldn't predict was how the galaxy would react to that understanding. She saved her document and titled it simply, Fear as Art, a preliminary study of human horror culture. Then she queued up another film had recommended, something called The Thing. She wanted to understand more before she submitted her findings. Besides, she was starting to enjoy the fear. Part 3. The emergency session of the Universal Terror Commission erupted in chaos before Ara finished presenting her findings. Representatives from 47 species filled the circular chamber with alarmed chatter, pulsing bioluminescence, chemical signals, and translated outbursts of disbelief. "Impossible," declared a medical officer, her gills fluttering rapidly. "No healthy species deliberately triggers fear responses. This is evidence of collective psychological damage." Ambassador of the Dominion growled his agreement. "Even my people, predators by evolution, do not toy with fear once the hunt ends. This is unnatural, perverse." Council Speaker pulsed orange, trying to restore order. "Dr. Ara, please continue. Explain how you reached these conclusions." Ara brought up holographic displays showing data she had collected. Brain scans, heart rate monitors, stress hormone levels, footage from theaters, haunted houses, and horror conventions, interviews with creators and consumers. The evidence was overwhelming and consistent. "They don't just tolerate fear," she explained. "They have cultivated it. They teach their children gradually increasing levels of horror, building tolerance and resilience. They have professional critics who evaluate fear entertainment based on criteria like effective scares and atmospheric tension. They spend billions of units of their currency annually on horror content. This isn't pathology. This is sophisticated cultural behavior. Cultural madness, snapped the. We must offer humanitarian aid, therapy, medication. We can help them overcome this disturbing compulsion. They don't want to overcome it, Ara said quietly. I asked, many times. Humans view their relationship with horror as a strength, not a weakness. Observer unfurled its sensory tendrils. How can they possibly view deliberately inflicted terror as strength? Ara displayed a quote from one of her interviews from Dr. Rachel Park, the therapist. The words hung in holographic form above the chamber. By the time a real crisis comes, we've already imagined something worse and survived it in our minds 1,000 times. The chamber fell silent. They use horror as preparation, Ara continued. As practice, as emotional conditioning. Remember the plague 3 centuries ago, the panic that spread across 40 systems. How long did it take most species to recover psychologically? Generations, council speaker admitted. They still have support groups for descendants of survivors. I have run projections based on human psychological profiles, Ara said. If a similar crisis struck Earth, humans would likely adapt within years, perhaps months. They would process the trauma, create art about it, and move forward. Some would probably write horror stories about it. That's obscene, they protested. That's survival, Ara countered. Humans survived one of the most hostile planets we've ever. Earth has predators, diseases, natural disasters, and climate extremes that would terrify most species. Humans not only survived but thrived, and they did it by refusing to be paralyzed by fear. They faced it, studied it, and eventually learned to control it so completely that they now use it as entertainment. Ambassador leaned forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing with interest. You're suggesting this horror obsession is an evolutionary advantage. I'm suggesting it's a sophisticated adaptation, one we've never encountered before. The debate raged for hours. The proposed intervention programs. Several other species supported this, viewing humanity's horror culture as evidence of species-wide trauma requiring treatment. But others, particularly some of the more pragmatic species, saw different implications. A elder, representing one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, spoke for the first time. Her species had survived countless extinction-level events through extreme risk aversion and careful planning. If humans can train themselves to remain functional during extreme stress, that represents significant strategic value. We should study this, not suppress it. The ambassador made a surprising announcement. My military has been conducting unauthorized experiments. We showed human horror films to combat training units. The chamber erupted again until raised a clawed hand for silence. The results were remarkable. Units exposed to human horror content showed 30% improvement in stress response during combat simulations. Decision-making under pressure improved. Tactical creativity increased. Whatever humans have done with fear, it works. This revelation changed the tone of the discussion. Several species requested access to human horror content for research purposes. They reluctantly agreed to pilot studies rather than immediate intervention. Council speaker called for a formal vote on how to proceed with humanity's application for galactic membership. Before the vote, he invited a human representative to address the commission. Sarah, Earth's ambassador to the galactic community, appeared via holographic projection. She was a calm woman in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and an easy confidence. I understand our horror culture concerns you, she began. I want to be clear about something. We don't expect other species to adopt our practices. We understand we're unusual, but we ask that you understand this is fundamental to who we are as a species. Your people deliberately inflict suffering on themselves, the representative said. No, Sarah corrected gently. We experience controlled fear in safe contexts. There's a crucial difference. When I watch a horror movie, I know I'm safe. The fear I feel is real, but the danger isn't. It's like, she paused, searching for an analogy. It's like training in a flight simulator instead of an actual aircraft. The experience is real enough to teach you, but you can't actually crash and die. But why? Asked the crystalline being from Sector 7. Why seek out any level of fear? Sarah smiled. Because fear is part of life. Bad things happen, people get hurt, we die. These are facts. Most species we've encountered seem to cope by avoiding thoughts of danger, by suppressing fear responses, by pretending the darkness isn't there. Humans cope differently. We run toward the darkness. We look at it directly. We imagine the worst-case scenarios and rehearse our responses. By the time real danger comes, it's never as bad as what we've already imagined. That seems exhausting, observed a methane breathing. It's empowering, Sarah countered. Think about your own species' responses to unexpected crises, the panic, the paralysis, the time needed to process and adapt. Humans don't have that luxury. Our planet never gave us time to slowly adapt. So we evolved to confront fear head-on, process it quickly, and move forward. Horror entertainment is just an extension of that survival mechanism. Council speaker pulsed with thoughtful blue light. You suggest that humanity's unusual relationship with fear represents not damage but adaptation. I know it does, Sarah said. Look at our history. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and natural disasters that should have wiped us out. We survive because we don't run from fear. We run toward it, learn from it, and keep going. The vote on humanity's galactic membership passed with a surprising majority. Even the abstained rather than voting against, though they reserved the right to offer psychological support if humans ever requested it. Several species immediately requested cultural exchange programs focused specifically on human horror traditions. The were most aggressive. Ambassador approached Ara after the session. My species needs what humans have. Our warriors are fearless in familiar situations but rigid when confronting the unknown. Human horror seems to train flexibility in fear response. We wish to establish formal exchange. Human horror experts will come to thee and teach our military trainers. Teach them what exactly? Ara asked. How to scare our soldiers properly, said, displaying what might have been a smile. How to prepare them for fears they haven't experienced yet. How to make them stronger through controlled terror. Word spread quickly. Within weeks, requests flooded Earth from dozens of species wanting to understand human horror. Some wanted military applications. Others saw therapeutic potential. A few simply wanted to experience this strange human art form for themselves. Ara accepted a newly created position as the galaxy's first professor of human horror studies. The university was on Nexus Prime, the galactic capital, and her inaugural lecture was scheduled for the first day of the academic cycle. She arrived to find the auditorium packed with students from 40 different species, all waiting nervously in their various seating configurations. She dimmed the lights. Behind her, a massive screen illuminated. Before we begin theoretical discussion, she announced, I believe in experiential learning. We're going to watch something humans call a classic. It's about an alien creature that hunts humans aboard a spaceship. The human title is Alien. I want you to pay attention to your own responses. Notice when you feel fear. Notice what happens after the fear. Notice how the story makes you feel when it's over. She started the film. Within minutes, the first screams echoed through the auditorium. A student's gills fluttered so rapidly her neighbor worried she was having a medical emergency. A methane breather's environmental suit fogged with stress chemicals. 3 students left within the first 30 minutes, unable to continue. But most stayed, and Ara watched them watching, observing the same progression she had experienced. Initial terror, gradual engagement with the story, investment in characters, anticipation of scares, and finally, when triumphed and the credits rolled, something unexpected happened. The students applauded. It wasn't universal. Some sat in shocked silence. Others appeared distressed and would clearly need processing time. But approximately 60% of the students, representing 26 different species, showed positive engagement responses. They had experienced fear and come through it not just intact but energized. During the discussion afterward, a young raised a manipulator appendage. I have a question. The film ends with safe but alone, floating in space in suspended animation. By human standards, is this a happy ending? Yes, Ara said. She survived. She defeated the creature. By human standards, survival against overwhelming odds is victory. Even at great cost. Especially at great cost. Humans value survival achieved through struggle more than safety that costs nothing. The student considered this. My species values safety above all else. We avoid risks. We plan carefully. We have survived millions of years this way, but we have also stagnated. We rarely innovate. We fear change almost as much as death. Perhaps we have too little fear, not too much. The insight hung in the air. Other students nodded or displayed equivalent gestures of agreement. They were beginning to understand what Ara had learned during her months on Earth. Fear wasn't humanity's weakness. It was their superpower, honed and refined until they could wield it like a tool. That semester, Ara taught her students about horror, about cultural variations in fear, about the psychological mechanisms underlying effective scares. She showed them classic films and had them read foundational texts. She brought in human horror creators to speak about their craft. She even arranged a field trip to Earth for the more adventurous students, where they experienced haunted houses and horror conventions firsthand. The course became the most popular elective in the university's history. Other institutions requested permission to develop similar programs. Publishers began translating human horror literature into hundreds of languages. Streaming services added horror categories. An entrepreneur opened the first off-world haunted house attraction, designed to scare species with different sensory configurations than humans. Not everyone approved. They maintained their official position that horror entertainment represented collective trauma. Some conservative species banned horror content entirely, viewing it as corrupting influence. Religious groups argued it glorified darkness and suffering. Critics claimed humans were weaponizing fear, though what war this was supposed to win remained unclear. But the movement continued. 3 years after first contact, approximately 30% of galactic species had citizens who regularly consumed human horror entertainment. Studies confirmed the findings. Controlled fear exposure improved stress response, enhanced resilience, and increased adaptive capacity. Therapists across the galaxy began incorporating horror-based exposure therapy into their practices. Military academies added horror films to training curricula. Ara published a comprehensive study titled Fear as Adaptation: How Humanity Weaponized Their Own Terror Response. The title was provocative, but the content was rigorously scientific. She documented not just what humans did with fear, but why it worked, and what other species might learn from it. On the 5th anniversary of first contact, she returned to Earth for a conference on horror studies. Met her at the spaceport, older now but still enthusiastic about his favorite subject. You changed the galaxy, he told her as they walked through the terminal. There are species out there learning to face their fears because of your work. I only documented what humans already knew, Ara replied. Maybe, but you translated it for everyone else. You showed them that fear doesn't have to be the enemy. It can be a teacher, a tool, even in the right context, a friend. They attended a screening that evening, a new horror film created through collaboration between human and filmmakers. It blended human fear aesthetics with philosophical concerns about time and entropy. The audience was mixed species, and when the scares came, the screams were a chorus of different biological fear responses, creating an oddly harmonious sound. When it ended, Ara felt the same satisfaction she'd experienced watching Alien for the first time. The fear had been real. The danger had been imaginary. The experience had been meaningful. "You know what I think," said as they left the theater. "I think humans didn't transform fear into entertainment. We transformed entertainment into a tool for confronting fear. The whole galaxy has been running from darkness for millions of years. We're the first species crazy enough to stop, turn around, and stare it in the face. And you know what we found?" "What?" "The darkness isn't as scary when you look at it directly. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to really look, you find truth there. About yourself. About life. About what it means to be alive in a universe that doesn't care whether you exist or not." Ara's antennae twitched with what might have been amusement. "You should write that down. It sounds like something a human horror creator would say." "I just might," grinned. "Want to grab dinner and watch another film? There's a zombie marathon at the old downtown theater." "Zombies," Ara mused. "Humans who died but continue moving. A metaphor for loss of self, for conformity, for the fear that we're already dead but don't know it yet." "Or sometimes," said, "they're just fun monsters that let us practice headshots." Ara made the clicking sound that humans had learned meant she was laughing. She had come to Earth 5 years ago expecting to find a species in need of rescue. Instead, she had found teachers.